I woke to the sound of a machine beeping somewhere down the hall and the taste of chalk on my tongue. It was 3 a.m. Someone had buckled a soft restraint around my wrist, not tight enough to hurt, just tight enough to leave a shadow of purple where the skin is thin. A styrofoam cup sat by the bed with 3 white tablets swelling in a puddle of water, and a printed card clipped to the rail that read, in blocky capital letters, "Long-Term Care." The overhead light was off, but the corridor was bright, and every few seconds the hush was split by a bell and a voice on the intercom calling for help that didn't come. They told me I would be here a few weeks to get strong. A little rehab, that was the word. Walk with a therapist, eat good meals, sleep through the night, and then go back to my house with the creaky porch steps and the rosemary bush that always grows too wild by the kitchen door. But the longer I lay here, the more those weeks stretched like gum on a shoe, sticky and thin, and I began to understand something unkind. I was not a patient to them. I was a number on a form. And when I later saw my daughter-in-law's name connected to a little company collecting consulting fees for placing elders like me, I knew exactly what I had become. Not a mother, not even a widow trying to keep herself steady, a revenue stream. How does a woman who still cooks her own Sunday stew and folds her own laundry get sold gently, politely into a place where the medicine cart comes like a train and your name rides a rail you didn't lay? If you'll listen, I'll tell you. And if you are anywhere near my age, I want you to listen with your hands open, not clenched, because the trap doesn't feel like a trap when it's set with love. The first week I tried to be agreeable. There's a rhythm here, like a factory dressed up in kindness. At 6, a girl in pink scrubs wheels a card and says, "Morning, honey, open up." And you open because you were taught to trust uniforms. Breakfast comes with a lid that lifts off to steam up your glasses, and by the time you get your fork into the eggs, they've cooled into a yellow sheet. You press the call button when your hip pinches or your throat scratches from the dry air, and sometimes a light on the wall blinks for 20 minutes, 30, and no one appears. A roommate 3 curtains down moans in her sleep. Someone shouts for her mother. The hall smells like disinfectant and something sweet, like cereals that sat too long in milk. They put a band on my wrist and a yellow sock on my ankle that says fall risk, as if fear itself were an illness they could treat. A young man asked me who the president was and what year it was and whether I knew what county we were in. I answered each question and watched him make a mark on a tablet, not meeting my eyes. I wanted him to ask me something real. The name of my late husband's first dog, which was Jasper. How long I worked at Dr. Keller's practice on Maple, 20 years. Which hymn I hum to myself when I feel alone. Blessed Assurance. Instead, he marked a little box that said mild impairment and told me to rest. I did not argue. I am not an arguer. But each time the cart came, it carried more. 1 pill to sleep, 1 pill to soften my blood, 1 pill to level my mood because adjusting to a facility can be stressful. On day 3, the night nurse added a patch for the aches and said I'd feel heavy for a few hours. I did. I woke at 2 with my tongue thick and a thirst that made me dream of the river by our old fishing spot. They call it care. Sometimes care is just quieting people down so the hallways can be managed with too few hands. The first time I understood something was off was at the nurse's station when I rolled up in the chair they insist I use and heard 2 staff whispering numbers the way bank tellers do. They didn't see me behind the plant with the dusty leaves. They said a name, my name, and then a code. A string of letters I recognized from a lifetime of typing insurance claims for Dr. Keller when I was younger and quicker. Certain codes pay better. That's an old truth in a new suit. If your condition fits the higher code, The facility gets more for you. If it doesn't, sometimes they tug the condition to fit. I called my son that afternoon. It rang 3 times and went to a voice I used to soothe when it cried at midnight over a bad dream about wolves. My daughter-in-law answered. She's efficient. Her voice is honeyed when she wants a door to open and sharp when she wants it to close. We talked to the doctor, she said. You're safer there, Mom. They've approved a longer stay. Approved. Such a clean word, like a stamp on an envelope. I want to go home, I told her. We can do a little help in the mornings. I can pay for that, but I can cook, I can bathe, I can be fine. She sighed and said, insurance won't cover home care at the level you need. And when I asked what level that was, she said, let the professionals decide. My son said something in the background I couldn't catch. I hope it was, I love you. It might have been, I have a meeting. Let me tell you how I ended up here, because the end is always braided into the beginning. I live in a small house with a yard that slants into a fence and a giant walnut tree that spits its shells like buckshot when the squirrels have their way. My left knee bothers me when it rains. I carry a cane when I walk to the mailbox. I still make pot roast on Sundays and fry apples with cinnamon when the cut-through boys sell them in paper bags at the corner. I don't drive at night anymore. I go to church, sit in the 3rd pew on the left, and before you say it, yes, I am lonely sometimes, but no, I am not helpless. In January, I slipped on a little puddle by the sink and landed hard on my hip. Not a break, just a deep bruise that made me curse my own stubbornness. My daughter-in-law came rushing like she was running the fire department. See, she said to my son, this is what I worry about. The emergency room doctor was kind and old enough to carry his own softness. He recommended a short rehab stay, 2 to 3 weeks tops, so I could do supervised walking, get my balance back, make sure the pain didn't turn into fear. Fear makes you fall worse than any loose rug, he said. He's right about that. They moved me from the hospital to a building that smells like bleach and carpet glue. It had a cheerful painting over the intake desk, all sunflowers and a fake window that never changed seasons. I signed a stack of papers the first day, my reading glasses slipping on the bridge of my nose, the print so small I had to guess at the words between the ones I knew. This is just consent, my daughter-in-law said, tapping here and here with a lacquered nail. This is just so Medicare knows you're in the program. This is just how we make sure you're safe. I told her I didn't want to be trouble. I have spent my whole life trying to be fewer stones in other people's shoes. 3 days in, something shifted. The therapist who wore bright sneakers and called me Miss H stopped coming, and a different woman wheeled me to a wing where the doors require a code to open. We're just putting you in a quieter area, she said. The sign said long-term care. I asked if there had been a mistake. She said, your family set you up for a longer plan. Insurance approved it. Insurance approved it. There's that stamp again, still clean, still hard. It's a strange thing to notice yourself from above. Day 1, I took 3 pills. Day 5, I took 5. Day 10, I took 7 and wore a patch that makes your mouth dry and your eyelids heavy. I began to make notes on the little pocket calendar my church sends each Christmas. When I told the night nurse I didn't need the sleeping pill because I'd napped too long after lunch, she said, "It's scheduled," and circled back later with a smile that didn't bend her eyes. Sleep came like fog and left like glue. A woman in the next bed whispers to herself at night. Once she whispered to me, "My son sold my house while I was here," she said. "Said it was for the best." I didn't know whether to tell her that best is a word people use when they mean easiest for themselves. I didn't want to carry one more sadness. Mine was heavy enough. I met the first person who looked at me instead of threw me on a Tuesday. She was young, maybe the age of my granddaughter if I'd been granted a granddaughter. Her name tag said Lucy, though I'll always think of her as the girl with the soft eyes who said Mrs. Hale instead of Sweetie. She brought me extra peaches with my lunch and asked about the photograph of my husband I kept tucked in the Bible by the bed. We learned how to talk around the camera in the corner and the open doors and the habit this place has of hearing what it wants. I told her where I worked when I was younger, at a little office on Maple where the carpet always smelled faintly of coffee and winter coats, and how I typed codes for years, learning which ones paid for a visit and which ones paid for a staircase of visits, how sometimes the difference wasn't medicine but language. She looked over her shoulder like a person does in a haunted house. Mrs. Hale, she whispered, your chart says you need 2 people to help you transfer and that you get disoriented when you're alone. She had just watched me plant my feet and stand with my cane and walk to the bathroom without taking down the curtain. Those codes, I told her, are worth more than the truth. She wanted to help. I could see the fight in her, but I could also see the rent in her eyes and the way she had probably promised herself to keep this job for 1 full year so she could get her little brother through community college. If they find out I showed you your chart, she said, they'll fire me. If you don't, I said, they'll keep doing it to every woman with gray hair and a trimmer. Her face changed. It is a holy thing to watch a young person choose where to stand. There is a meeting they schedule when they want to nail you into the plan. They call it a care conference, which sounds like church, but is not. A woman from social services who wears a smile like a latch, the administrator who calls everyone folks, a nurse who taps the pen as if it were a metronome, and your family, the ones who brought you or the ones who did not stop it, and in my case my son and his wife, who both smelled faintly of the coffee they buy in cups instead of percolators. They don't yell. That's not the style. They use words like liability and safety and standards of care. I said I wanted to go home. I said we could hire someone 2 hours in the morning and 2 at night. I said I would wear the alert button around my neck and walk only where the rug won't catch. The administrator nodded as if I'd described a plot of a movie she saw once, and then explained that my level had been assessed and that a safer environment had been approved. Approved, approved, approved. You can rub a word like a stone, but it won't warm. I turned to my son. Have you seen the bills? I asked him. Do you know what they've been charging for me to swallow my own fear at 9 and sleep until 9? He looked down at his phone, then at the table, then at me. He shook his head. He had not looked. My daughter-in-law tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "We trust the professionals." And the social worker wrote something in the notes that will follow me until I die, even if I live, even if I fight. I left the meeting and lay on my bed and watched the ceiling tile with a tiny brown stain like a map of a country nobody visits on purpose. Lucy came to me that night like a girl in a story carrying a candle. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "don't say anything right now, but there's a payment on your account for consulting services, and the company name is, well, it looks like your daughter-in-law's name in there. Is she doing consulting?" I felt my heart do the slow old thud of a drum. Nobody has the breath to play. My daughter-in-law calls herself a consultant. It is a word that can mean everything and nothing, and on paper it often means money for making introductions. "Find out what you can without losing your job," I said, "and if there's a way to tell someone without losing your job, we'll take it." She made 2 calls from her car with the engine off and the windows down. There's a woman in every county who takes the calls nobody else wants. Here they call her the ombudsman, and she walks into halls like ours and asks to see the things people don't like to show. Lucy also called a friend who works at a law office that helps old people navigate the cruel corners of the world we built for them with good intentions and bad incentives. She didn't tell them my name. She told them a story about a woman who can still do her Sudoku and is being medicated like a child at a noisy daycare, and who has been coded into a higher payment bracket because fear tastes like money to certain men. The friend at the law office looked at the sample charting Lucy sent. No names, just the bones of it. And she wrote back that she could drive a truck through the holes. Copy and paste notes for multiple patients where only the names changed. The highest reimbursing codes used as if they were default settings. Medication lists that grew like ivy and never shrank, even when function improved. And then she called me herself and said, "Ma'am, we can do this 2 ways, slow and polite, which sometimes ends with a pat on the head, or careful and official." I said, "I have been polite for 72 years. Let's be careful and official." I signed a complaint with the state office. That sentence sounds simple. It was not. It meant reading every line twice. It meant writing my name in a hand that trembled only because I was angry, not because I was weak. It meant trusting that a stranger behind a desk would see me as a woman with a life and not just one more voice in a drawer full of files. Lucy brought me copies of the medicine logs, the shift notes, the monthly summaries. My son stopped by during one of these afternoons with flowers he didn't have time to cut and a brow as tight as a fist. He stood awkwardly by the bed and told me that his wife had explained everything, that this was the safest and most economical way to keep me alive. I asked him again if he had opened a single statement. He told me he would. He told me he was sorry this was hard. I told him hard is not the same as wrong. When the notice came for a hearing, I felt my stomach drop the way it did when I first rode the wooden roller coaster at the county fair and saw the curve ahead where the whole world fell away. A hearing. Not a courtroom with flags and jurors and wood polished so shiny your face looks like a portrait in it, but a room with a table and a seal on the wall and a person with the power to say yes or no. The facility would send their people. The state would send theirs. Lucy would sit by me in a blouse that made her look older and a spine that made her look unafraid. I would wear my good jacket and the brooch my husband bought me when he still thought we had time to spoil each other. My son said he would be there. My daughter-in-law asked if she needed to cancel a conference. I told her to do as she pleased. I have stopped begging for anyone's attention. In the week before the hearing, I slept badly and thought in lists. Reasons I deserve to decide where I live. Things I can still do without help. Names of neighbors who would bring me soup, because goodness is still daily in this world if you know where to look. I also thought about shame. Shame is a flashlight turned the wrong direction. It blinds the person holding it and leaves the rest of the room in the dark. I told myself a fact so simple it should not have needed saying. Loving your child does not mean letting them choose your sky. The morning of the hearing, the sky was bright and lying. We drove in a van that shakes when it idles. The building was gray and pretend friendly, like a bank built for people who don't have bank accounts. In the waiting area, there was a rack of pamphlets. Your rights in long-term care, how to file a complaint, 10 signs of elder abuse, and a plant with leaves so glossy I wanted to laugh. The administrator from the facility wore a navy suit and a little flag pin. The social worker carried a binder as fat as a Sunday roast. My daughter-in-law wore a dress that knew how to be photographed. My son looked down at his shoes. They spoke first. That's the custom. They explained their policies. They explained their commitment to safety. They explained my diagnoses, some of which were familiar, and some of which sounded like cousins of words I'd never met. The social worker said with sad eyes that I had expressed confusion and misplaced anger. and that families often felt guilty about the necessary decisions that care required. My daughter-in-law dabbed at her eyes and said she had only ever wanted what was best, that I forget things, that I sometimes call her by the wrong name, which is true when I am tired and she is behaving like a stranger. Then our turn. Lucy's lawyer friend, she is hardly older than my son, spoke in a voice that could cut fruit. She laid down a copy of my primary doctor's notes from before the fall, showing no depression, no cognitive impairment, a fall risk appropriate to a woman with an old knee. She laid down the facility's notes claiming I needed 2 people to lift me from bed when I had just walked into the room with a cane. She laid down medication logs that grew despite my function improving. She laid down a chart of codes with reimbursement rates and a highlighting pen that drew a yellow road through every high-paying code on my chart. Finally, she laid down bank records, a public file collected fair and square, showing payments from the facility to a small company sharing a name with my daughter-in-law's middle initial. I did not enjoy watching my daughter-in-law's face. I did not come to gloat. I came to be a person again. Lucy testified about the pressure to medicate for compliance and how the same note appeared in multiple charts with the names altered, like a bad student copying homework and hoping the teacher is tired. She said she had been told to describe me in ways that turned me into a higher bracket. She said it quickly because courage is easier fast. When it was my turn, I told the truth plain. I am 72. I forget names sometimes, and I don't like to drive after dusk. I also still balance a checkbook. I can make my oatmeal. I can take a shower with a chair and a rail. I know when I wake up scared. I know the difference between scared and sick. If you lock the door and strap me to a schedule that serves your staffing, you can make me look like anything you want on paper. But I am not a paper. I am a mother. I am someone's wife still, even if he's gone. I am the lady who sits near the hymn board and sings alto too loud. I am not your code. The man at the head of the table cleared his throat. He asked a few questions, nothing theatrical, and said he would take it under advisement and that a written decision would come promptly, which in any world run by offices means you should go home and eat something while you wait. We rolled back down to the van through a corridor where the fluorescent lights flickered, and my son walked next to me, slow. In the parking lot, he put his hand on the old vinyl arm of the chair and said, "Mom, I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" And he said, "For not looking." And I told him it is a good start to look now. That night in the facility, I slept as if I had let go of a rope I'd been gripping for months. The machine still beeped. The hallway still ate voices whole, but I slept. In the morning, Lucy tucked a folded paper into the pages of my Bible, and I didn't read it until she'd gone because I could feel the heat of news through the fold. It was a note she'd written in neat print. Decision soon. We did well. I breathed out and thought of my husband's hat on the peg by the back door, where it has hung for 12 years without being any use except to remind me that love leaves a shape. 2 days later, the letter came, not in a uniformed hand, but in the chapped fingers of the day clerk who pushes the mail cart like it's a stubborn mule. The envelope was ordinary and cruel because of it, the way ordinary things can be cruel when they carry the weight of a hinge. I opened it with the plastic knife they give us with our lunch trays. The paper smelled faintly of toner and dust. The words were careful. These letters are always careful, but they were also clear. The long-term placement was voided. My right to decide where and how I received care was affirmed. The matter of the facility's practices and the flow of those consulting payments was being referred upstream for further action, and pending a safe discharge plan, I could leave. I read the paragraph twice, and then I read the one sentence that mattered most, the one that changed the air in my chest. The residence capacity is intact. I said it out loud to the empty room, and it sounded like someone else was in there with me. Capacity is an office word that means you get to sign your name and have it count. I have been signing my name since I was 10 and opened a savings account for the summer peach stand my father let me run out by the road. Nobody questioned my capacity then. Now a stamped sentence gave it back like a coat I never should have been made to take off. Lucy hugged me sideways in the hall, professional enough to make it look like she was adjusting my sweater. "You'll be out soon," she whispered. "We'll do this right so nobody can say otherwise." She moved quickly after that because once a door opens in these places, it has a way of trying to close on the person walking through it. She gathered my medication list and cut it down to what my own doctor had prescribed before the bruise and the fear conspired to make me into a profit margin. She helped schedule a follow-up with Dr. Keller's new partner. The old man finally retired to a lake where he can fish without checking his pager, and she called the home care agency that my church ladies swore by. 2 hours in the morning, 2 at night, she said, and a fall alert pendant that calls a real person instead of a maze. My son came that afternoon alone. No perfume cloud, no tapping heel at his shoulder. He looked like the boy who used to come home muddy and worried that I would scold him for the stains and then sigh with relief when I only scolded him for forgetting to take off his shoes. He stood with his hands in his pockets and tried to meet my eyes and failed and tried again. "I opened the bills," he said. His voice was quiet, like a man talking in a church, even if it's only to himself. I didn't know. I told him that not knowing is not a crime, but letting not knowing make you lazy can be. He nodded as if he'd just found a bruise on himself he couldn't remember earning. "I want to make it right." I told him the first way to make it right was to say no when a person he loves tells him to look away. We made the plan, and the plan became the day. It is not dramatic to leave a place like that when you leave with papers in order. They do not chase you down the hall with shackles. They make you sign forms that say you are choosing to go, that you understand the risks, as if risks don't exist under their fluorescent lights, and then they send an aide to fold the blanket you brought from home and tuck it into a bag with your name in block letters. Lucy walked with me to the door and did not cry, which made me love her more than if she had. "I'll see you outside of here," she said. "I'll bring peaches when they're in." We both knew it was a promise bigger than fruit. The sky was the same sky as the day I went in, but I felt it differently, which is one of the tricks of being human that I am glad I never outgrew. My son helped me into his car like I was a person who both deserved help and knew how to be helped. A fine difference, and not a small one. The first stop was my house, because I needed to see it again the way a person needs to see their own face in a mirror after a long illness. The rosemary was indeed wild, like a promise you forgot to water that decided it didn't need you after all. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Foley, who pretends not to snoop while openly snooping, waved so hard I thought her arm might come off. Inside, the quiet had a shape. The couch remembered my weight. The kitchen remembered my hands. The clock in the hall ticked as if time had been practicing while I was away. We did the safety things because safety is not the enemy. Fear is. My son fixed the curling edge of the rug that has been trying to trip me for years. He put a bright strip of tape on the top stair to make it shout at my eyes. The home care lady arrived right on time and carried a clipboard that meant more contracts, but also meant someone would be in my kitchen at 8, with an ear for the kettle and a mind to check the smoke alarm battery. She was kind without hurry. Kindness without hurry is its own medicine. That first night home, I stood in my bathroom and stared at the shower rail like it was a gate I had to pass through to be allowed back into my own life. I took my time. I sat on the bench. I washed slowly. I cried once, Not because I was sad, but because water on clean skin feels like a treaty with yourself. I slept in my own bed with the window cracked open and the smell of wet earth from the watering my son had done without being asked. I woke at 5 like I always have and made oatmeal and put a handful of raisins in and stirred them until they plumped. I thanked God out loud, which I learned from my mother and which still feels like I'm opening a door for a friend, even if I'm alone in the house. The letters did not stop just because I left. They changed tone. The facility sent a statement written by a lawyer who has never been in a room where someone calls for help and hears only the echo. It said they take allegations seriously. It said they are committed to the highest standards. It did not say anything about copy and paste notes or consulting fees. The state sent another letter, this one drier, saying that an investigation was ongoing and that my testimony might be requested again and that retaliation is prohibited by law. The law is a blunt instrument sometimes, but it is better than the bare hand of a man who has never mopped a floor. My daughter-in-law sent a text on a Sunday morning that said, "We should talk." I told her that was fine and suggested Tuesday in the daylight with my pastor in the next room because I am old, but I am not a fool. She arrived in a suit that made her look like a person who wins arguments by standing up. She started with tears at the corners of her eyes, even though her voice didn't match. "I only wanted the best," she said. "You don't understand how complicated it is." I told her she was right that I did not understand how a woman marries into a family and makes money from placing her husband's mother into a place that sedates her because staffing is tight on weekends. "Explain it to me," I said. But she did not explain. She talked in circles until the circle was only a dot, and then she left, and the house felt bigger when the door closed. I am not interested in vengeance. My pastor says that vengeance is a poison that thinks it's a prayer. I am interested in accountability, which is just the grown-up word for truth with consequences. The hearing had opened more doors, and Lucy's lawyer friend walked through them with the calm of a person who has rehearsed the steps. The facility faced a fine that would not undo a single long night, but might stop a few others. The administrator, he of the flag pin, lost a license that he had worn like armor. The consulting company with my daughter-in-law's initials in it became a thing of the past faster than she could change the font on its website. These are small victories in a world that prefers large headlines, but they are real as a loaf of bread on the table when you're hungry. What did I want after all that? I wanted to stand in my yard and decide for myself when to go in and when to stay out. I wanted to sit at the kitchen table and open my Bible and not feel like a case number with a spine. I wanted my son to come on Tuesdays, not because guilt had a hand on his collar, but because love did. And so that is what we did. He came with a rake and fixed the way the leaves had gathered at the fence as if they were planning something. We went to the grocery store together, and I taught him how to tell if an avocado is just right by feeling the little stem nub like a secret handshake. He drove me to church the first 2 Sundays, and then I told him I wanted to try the morning bus again because reclaiming a small thing is sometimes the bravest kind. Do you want to know the thing that surprised me? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. There is a difference. Triumph shouts. Steady hums. Triumph burns out. Steady holds. People in town heard about the case. You cannot keep a story small once it has eaten its way out of a building like that, and some of them came by with casseroles, because that is the old language of apology in the Midwest. I took the dishes with thanks and stacked them next to the sink, and understood that shame had run its rounds and come back to roost where it belonged. Lucy came by one Saturday with a paper bag full of peaches she bought from a man at the market who flirted with her in a way that made both of them laugh. We sat in my kitchen and peeled and sliced and sugared and put 2 pies in the oven because grief and victory both taste better warm. I asked her about her work and her brother and whether she was sleeping. She said she was sleeping better now that she had filed her own letter, the one that makes her a whistleblower whether she wanted a title or not. It's scary, she said. It's right, I said. And then we ate pie. I tell you all of this for a reason that isn't only my own healing. I tell you because there is a web of good women listening to this with their hands on the arms of their chairs and their eyes on a door that they hope nobody opens without knocking. I tell you because you will be handed papers in your life with print so small it might as well be a secret, and you will be told that signing is love, and you will be tempted to sign because you don't want to be the heavy thing in anyone's pocket. Listen to a woman who made that mistake and lived to say it plain. Love without questions is not love. It is convenience dressed as kindness. Ask what a word means before you let it into your house. Approved does not mean blessed. Safe does not mean silent. Long-term does not mean forever unless you let it. Ask to see the bill and read the codes even if you don't know the codes. The act of asking sometimes cleans the room. And sons and daughters, because I know you are listening too, some of you with the phone in your lap and a knot in your throat, do not let your busyness make a liar out of your love. Look at the paper. Sit in the room. Don't outsource the hard part of being someone's child to a facility with glossy brochures. There are other stories I could tell you that would fit into this one, like seeds in a pomegranate. A neighbor whose niece rewrote a will with a pen that should burn her hand. A woman at church whose daughter broadcasts her mother's worst moments on a glowing screen for strangers to judge and call it awareness. Those are battles for another day. Today, I want you to hear just one sentence and try it on like a coat. You are not a burden. You are not a billable hour. You are a person with a name that is older than any code. If you are listening from a small apartment where the walls are thin and the nights are long, I want you to practice a sentence with me so your mouth knows the shape of it when the time comes. The sentence is, what am I signing? Say it to the nurse with the pen, to the son with the tired eyes, to the woman with the click of a spreadsheet in her voice. Make them answer in words you understand. Make them slow down. If they cannot slow down, do not sign. The truth is never in a hurry to trick you. I have not forgiven everything. Forgiveness is not a rug you throw over a hole so nobody falls in. It is the work of building a bridge so you can get to the other side without hatred breaking your ankles. I have forgiven myself for the signature I should have read. I have partly forgiven my son because he now brings his questions with the groceries and sets both on the counter like they belong. I have not forgiven the woman who married him, not yet, because she has not asked and because I am not God. I have, however, set down the stone I was carrying with her name on it. It was breaking my back and not hers. Sometimes in the evening, the light hits the walnut leaves in a way that makes them look like they're lit from inside. I sit on the porch with my cane propped like an old friend and wait for the bus to hiss at the corner and for Mrs. Foley to pretend again not to be watching. I think about Jasper, the dog my husband had when he was a boy, and about the first check I ever wrote and the way the teller smiled at my name as if it were a thing that could move mountains. I think about Lucy and her soft eyes and hard spine, and I pray that the world is a little kinder to her than it was to me. And then I think about you, whoever you are, wherever you are listening from, and I wish I could press a peach into your hand and say, "Here, taste this." This is what truth can be like if you give it time. Before I go, because stories don't end so much as they find a place to rest, I want to ask you something you may not want to answer, at least not out loud. When someone you love says, "Sign here so we can take care of you," will you stop them long enough to ask, "What am I signing?" When a voice in a suit tells you, "This is safer," will you wave your own life like a flag and ask them to show their math? And if you are the child of someone old enough to have your baby teeth in a jar somewhere in their kitchen, will you choose the slow, inconvenient, eye-to-eye love that reads the bill and sits through the night and says, "No, we won't code my mother into a prophet," even when the person across the desk smiles like a wolf in a cardigan? Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me if your porch faces east or west. Tell me if you have a pie recipe that never fails or a hymn that keeps you steady. And if you have a story like mine, a paper you signed, a room you wanted to leave, a night you thought would last forever, put it in the comments so another woman can read it at 2 a.m. and feel a hand on her shoulder where there is none. We are all taking turns being the strong one. Tonight it's me. Tomorrow it might be you. At the end of the screen, they'll show you 2 more of our stories, because that's how this little lamp of a channel keeps burning. One about a will that wandered and found its way back home, and one about a daughter who learned the internet can shame you honest. Watch them if you want to, or turn off the machine and go stand in your kitchen and pour yourself a glass of water and say your own name out loud until it sounds like a bell. It belongs to you. It always did.